"Sir, my mother has a ring exactly like yours." The coffee pot was still in her hand when she said it. And Adrian Moretti, the man who made Baltimore's waterfront go quiet just by walking onto it, stopped breathing. Not flinched, not looked up, stopped. The way a person stops when something tears open inside them that they have spent 15 years stitching shut. His knuckles went white around the mug. Because 3 rings existed in this world. He wore one. The second was buried with his murdered brother. The third belonged to the man he had been hunting for 15 years, the man he believed had lit the match. And this exhausted waitress had just told him her mother kept it in a jewelry box. If you're watching this right now, please take a second to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Now stay with me all the way to the end, because this one is going to take everything you think you know and turn it completely upside down. The rain came down in sheets that night. Not the soft kind of rain that makes people nostalgic, the kind that washes the streets clean and makes Baltimore look almost beautiful from a distance. This was the violent kind, the kind that hits the pavement like it has a grudge, the kind that makes honest people stay home and pushes everyone else out into the dark. It was 2:17 in the morning when the door to the Harbor Light Diner swung open and let in a gust of cold, wet air that rattled every paper napkin on every table in the place. Lily Bennett was behind the counter with a coffee pot in her hand and circles under her eyes dark enough to pass for bruises. She was 29 years old, and she had been on her feet for 16 hours straight. Her lower back ached. Her feet were numb below the ankle. She had already refilled the same pot of decaf 4 times for the same booth of retired schoolteachers who kept talking about a cruise they were never going to take. She did not look up when the door opened. She figured it was another drunk looking for somewhere warm, or a cab driver on break, or one of the overnight guys from the loading docks down on the waterfront who sometimes came in smelling like salt water and diesel and ordered stacks of pancakes without saying a word. But the man who walked in was none of those things. She heard it first in the sound of his footsteps, deliberate, evenly spaced, not hurrying despite the rain, the kind of footsteps that belonged to a man who had decided long ago that he was not going to rush for anything or anyone, not even a storm. Then she heard the way the entire diner went quiet, not the polite quiet of people noticing a stranger, the specific quiet of people deciding without discussing it to look somewhere else. Lily looked up. The man was tall, broad across the shoulders, dressed in a long, dark coat that was soaked through at the collar and the sleeves, but somehow still looked expensive. His hair was dark and wet and pushed back from a face that was sharp around the jaw and careful around the eyes. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, but carried himself like someone who had been tired for a very long time. His right hand, hanging loose at his side, had knuckles that were split and swollen. Recent damage, the kind that comes from hitting something harder than skin. He chose the corner booth, back to the wall facing the door. He did not look at the menu. He did not look at his phone. He just sat there with his wet coat still on and looked at the door like he was waiting for something to come through it. Lily brought the coffee without being asked. She set the mug down in front of him, filled it, and said nothing. That was the thing about the overnight shift. You developed a sense for which customers wanted conversation and which ones would tip better if you just left them alone. This one was definitely the second kind. She started to turn away. "Black is fine," he said. Low voice, controlled, like someone who had trained himself to take up as little sound in a room as possible. "Already poured it black," she said. She saw something pass across his face, not quite a smile, more like the memory of one. She left him with his coffee and went back to check on the school teachers who had finally stopped talking about the cruise and started talking about a book one of them had read that the others had no interest in. Lily refilled their cups, smiled, did the automatic calculations in her head about the tip, and then picked up the coffee pot to make her way back toward the corner booth. That was when she saw the ring. He had wrapped both hands around the mug, and his right hand was on top, and the ring sat heavy on his 4th finger. Gold, wide band. The kind of ring that was not decorative, the kind that was a statement, and carved into the face of it was an emblem she had seen before, a lighthouse split down the middle by a crack shaped like a bolt of lightning. Lily stopped walking. Her brain did the thing it always did. When it was too tired to be careful, it skipped past the filter between thought and speech and just said the thing out loud. "Sir, my mother has a ring exactly like yours." The man did not flinch. He did not look up. He went completely, absolutely, unnaturally still. Not the stillness of someone startled. The stillness of someone who had just heard something that rearranged the entire architecture of everything they believed. The coffee mug sat between his hands, and he did not move. The school teachers kept talking. The old jukebox in the corner ran through the last few bars of something slow and scratchy. Rain threw itself against the windows. Then very slowly, Adrian Moretti raised his eyes. And Lily Bennett, for reasons she could not explain and would not be able to later, felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "What did you say?" His voice was perfectly even, perfectly controlled, which somehow made it worse. Lily's professionalism kicked in the way it always did when she sensed something shifting in a room. She gave him the polite customer smile, the one that apologized for existing. "I'm sorry, sir. I think I'm just exhausted. Long shift. Can I get you anything else?" "What you said, about your mother's ring." "I misspoke. I apologize." "You didn't misspeak." He said it without raising his voice, without moving. "Describe it." Lily set the coffee pot down on the edge of the table between them because her hands had started to shake and she did not want him to see it. "Sir, I really think—" "Describe the ring. Still calm, still quiet." And somehow that was the most frightening version of those 3 words she had ever heard. "A lighthouse," she said, because she could not make herself lie and look at those eyes at the same time, with a crack down the middle, like a lightning bolt. Adrian Moretti put both hands flat on the table. Lily noticed that his knuckles had gone white. "Where did your mother get it?" "I don't know." "Where is your mother now?" Something protective snapped awake inside Lily's chest. She picked up the coffee pot and straightened her spine and looked at him with the particular expression she had developed over years of dealing with difficult customers, difficult landlords, and a difficult world. The expression that said, "I may be tired, but do not mistake tired for weak." "I think I misremembered," she said clearly. "I apologize for bothering you. Enjoy your coffee." She walked away. She did not look back. But she felt his eyes on her the entire length of the diner, and she did not draw a full breath until she was through the kitchen door and standing next to the industrial dishwasher, with the steam rising around her ankles. Her heart was hammering. She pressed her back against the wall and made herself breathe. What was that? What was that about a ring? Why did he look at her like she had just confessed to something? Why did every alarm bell she had ever developed over 29 years of learning to read rooms and read people fire off simultaneously the moment those eyes landed on her? She did not know the answers to any of those questions. She only knew one thing with complete certainty. She should not have said a word about the ring. Out in the dining room, Adrian Moretti sat motionless in his corner booth and did the math. Only 3 rings had ever been made. His father had commissioned them from a jeweler in 1987, the year the Moretti family had formed the original alliance that built their shipping empire. The rings were symbols of the inner circle, the seal of the compact. You did not give them away, you did not sell them, you did not lose them. Adrian wore one. The second ring had been placed in a casket and buried with his brother Julian at Greenmount Cemetery 15 years ago. Adrian had put it there himself. The third ring had belonged to Daniel Cross, the Moretti family accountant, who had vanished the same week Julian died. The man Adrian had spent 15 years hunting. The man who every piece of evidence suggested had orchestrated the warehouse fire that took Julian's life and then disappeared before he could be made to answer for it. That ring should not exist in Baltimore. It should not be on the hand of some tired waitress's elderly mother, which meant either everything Adrian had believed for 15 years was wrong, or this woman was exactly who she appeared to be, and her mother was something else entirely, and neither of them had the faintest idea of the danger they were sitting inside. He left a $100 bill on the table folded once. He did not touch his coffee again. He walked out of the Harbor Light Diner into the rain, took out his phone and called the only person he trusted. "Caleb." "Still awake," said Caleb Shaw, which was not a complaint, just a statement of fact, because Caleb had been in Adrian's orbit for 12 years, and still awake was simply the baseline condition of his existence. "The waitress at Harbor Light. Her name is on her badge. Lily something. I need everything." A pause. "Define everything." "Mother, father, background, medical records, financial situation, everything." Another pause, slightly longer this time. "Adrian, what happened tonight?" "Just find it. And Caleb, nobody touches them. Nobody gets near them. You understand me?" "Understood." Caleb's voice shifted slightly. But you should know the ambush at the docks. 3 of the men were paid through a shell company. I'm still tracing it. Keep tracing. Call me the moment you have anything." Adrian ended the call and stood in the rain and looked at the light still burning in the diner window. He expected when Caleb reported back to find the family of a traitor, a relative of Daniel Cross perhaps, someone who had been protected by blood money or hidden assets, or the loyalty of a man who had run before he could be caught. He did not expect what Caleb actually found, because Rebecca Bennett had no records prior to 1994. No birth certificate in the state of Maryland, no school records, no Social Security history before that year, no employment records, no medical history, no driver's license, no paper trail of any kind, as if Rebecca Bennett had not existed at all before the same year Adrian Moretti died and Daniel Cross vanished. Caleb called back at 4:15 in the morning. "Adrian, tell me, the mother Rebecca Bennett, she doesn't exist before 1994. A pause. Someone built her a life, gave her a name, a history, documents, good work, professional work, but not perfect." Adrian stood very still in his study, looking at the rain against the windows. And the daughter, Lily Ann Bennett, born 1996, grew up here in Baltimore. Single mother, no father listed on the birth certificate. Did 2 years of community college night school accounting program, dropped out when the mother's health deteriorated. Works double shifts. No criminal record, no known associations, no debt beyond medical bills. Caleb paused. "Adrian, she's just a waitress, a tired, broke waitress who's been holding her family together by herself for 3 years. Adrian closed his eyes. "Keep watching, both of them, from a distance. Nobody goes near them." "Already done." Adrian sat in his study until the sky began to lighten, and he turned the possibilities over in his mind with the same methodical patience he applied to everything, and nothing he came up with made him feel anything other than deeply, profoundly uneasy. Across the city, Lily arrived home at 3:30 in the morning, kicked off her shoes in the doorway, and found her mother sitting in the kitchen in the dark. Rebecca Bennett was 61 years old. She had been diagnosed with a progressive neurological condition 2 years earlier, the kind that didn't announce itself dramatically, but crept forward quietly, stealing small pieces of a person over time. Some days, she was herself sharp and warm and full of her particular dry humor. Other days, she wandered through conversations that existed somewhere else entirely, speaking to people who weren't in the room, looking for things she couldn't name. Tonight she was somewhere in between. "You're late," Rebecca said. "Double shift, Mom, same as yesterday." Lily filled a glass of water and set it on the table. "Why are you up? You should be sleeping." "Couldn't sleep?" Rebecca wrapped both hands around the water glass. Something felt wrong tonight. Lily sat down across from her mother. She was so tired her vision kept softening at the edges, but there was something in her mother's expression that caught her attention and held it. "Mom," she said carefully, "where did you get that ring, the one in your jewelry box, the gold one with the lighthouse?" Rebecca went very still, which was strange because Rebecca in her uncertain states usually moved constantly, small, restless gestures, hands that couldn't settle, eyes that shifted around the room, searching for something familiar to land on. But she went still in the same way that man at the diner had gone still, the same complete and total absence of movement. "Why are you asking about the ring?" Rebecca's voice was different now, focused, clear. "I saw one tonight, on a man at the diner, identical. Same emblem, same gold band, same mom, they were exactly the same." Rebecca's hand shot across the table and gripped Lily's wrist, hard. "Listen to me." The clarity in her eyes was sudden and fierce, and nothing like the soft confusion of the past several months. "Listen to me very carefully, Lily. Never show that ring to a Moretti. Do you understand me? Never. Especially not Victor." Lily stared at her mother. "Who is Victor?" But already the clarity was fracturing. She could see it happening, the way the focus in her mother's eyes broke apart like ice, the way the grip on her wrist loosened and became uncertain. Mom, look at me. Who is Victor?" Rebecca blinked. Her gaze drifted sideways. "I'm so tired," she said softly. "Why are we in the kitchen?" Lily sat there for a long time after she got her mother settled back into bed. She sat at the kitchen table in the gray, pre-dawn quiet and turned her mother's words over and over. Never show that ring to a Moretti, especially not Victor. She had never heard her mother use that name. had never heard her mother reference anything that sounded like the world. That man at the diner clearly occupied the world of waterfront dread and $100 bills and knuckles split from hitting things, and the specific silence that fell over a room when you walked into it. But Rebecca had known that world. That was what the words meant. Rebecca had known it well enough to be afraid of it, had known it well enough to know a name. Lily went to the closet shelf and found the old wooden box where her mother kept the few pieces of jewelry she owned, a string of pearls, a broken watch earrings from a trip to Virginia Beach 15 years ago. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a square of dark velvet, the ring. She unwrapped it slowly. Heavy gold wide band, the lighthouse with the lightning crack splitting it down the center. She had asked her mother about it once years ago when she was maybe 12. Rebecca had said it was an old family heirloom from a great uncle. She had said it with the mild disinterest of someone who had rehearsed the answer so many times it had lost all texture. Lily had believed her the way children believe the things that are said with calm authority. She did not believe it now. She wrapped the ring back in its velvet and put it in the box and put the box back on the shelf. Then she sat down on the edge of her bed and stared at the ceiling. The man at the diner. His name. She hadn't asked it, but she had seen the way the kitchen staff reacted when she mentioned the corner booth to Manny, the overnight cook, before she clocked out. The way Manny's face changed. Corner booth? What did he look like? He'd asked. She described him. Manny had exhaled slowly. You stay out of that man's way, Lily. You hear me? You stay way out of his way. Who is he? Manny had turned back to the grill and said quietly, Adrian Moretti, and nothing else. The name meant something. Even Lily, who had spent her entire adult life carefully keeping her head down and her attention on the next shift and the next bill and the next medication refusal letter from the insurance company, even she had heard that name attached to certain kinds of stories. Shipping, waterfront, the kind of business that moved things between one place and another without always needing to be honest about what the things were. But more than the name, she remembered the look on his face when she had said the words about the ring. Not anger, not threat. Something more complicated than either of those. Something that looked, if she was honest, like the expression of a man who had just been told that the ground he'd been standing on for 15 years was not solid after all. She fell asleep in her work clothes and did not dream. By morning, everything had already started to move. Lily arrived at the diner at 9, showered and changed but not remotely rested, and was 2 hours into the breakfast rush when she noticed the man in the gray sedan parked across the street. He was there when she arrived. He was still there at 11. He had a coffee cup he never seemed to finish, and he was not looking at his phone. He was watching the door. She told herself she was being paranoid. She had waitressed long enough to understand that her brain, when underfed and oversleepless, had a tendency to find patterns that weren't there. But at noon, when she took her break and went around to the alley to call the insurance company for the 6th time about her mother's medication authorization, she noticed a second car at the end of the block. Different car, different man, same quality of stillness. She canceled the insurance call and went back inside. At 1 o'clock, Adrian Moretti came through the front door. He was dressed differently than the night before, dark jacket, no tie, but the same deliberateness in how he moved, the same way of walking into a room, like he had already decided where every piece of it was going to be before he arrived. The knuckles were still swollen. He had not slept. She could see that from 10 feet away. He chose a table, not the corner booth. This time she noticed a regular table in the middle of the floor, and he looked at her, and he waited. Lily set down the plates she was carrying, delivered them to table 7 with her best professional smile, and then walked over to where Adrian Moretti was sitting and said quietly and very clearly, "If those men outside are yours, you can tell them to leave." Something shifted in his face, not quite surprise, more like recalibration. "They're not going to bother you." "They're already bothering me. They've been sitting outside for 3 hours. My manager has noticed, my coworkers have noticed, and She stopped herself, lowered her voice further. "I don't know who you are or what you think you know, but I am asking you as calmly as I am capable of asking right now to please leave me and my mother alone." "I can't do that," he said, simply, without apology. "Excuse me. I said I can't do that. Not yet. Lily." He said her name like he had known it for a while, which set a small cold chill up her spine. "I need to talk to you about the ring." "There is no ring." "There is absolutely a ring, and you know it, and your mother knows it, and the fact that she has it means—" He paused, and she watched him choose his next words with the deliberateness of a man who knew that whatever he said next was going to matter significantly. "It means that something I've believed for 15 years might not be true." Lily crossed her arms. "That's your problem, sir, not mine. It became yours the moment she described it to me last night." "I described nothing. I made a tired mistake. I apologized." "Lily." He leaned forward slightly. "Those men outside are mine, yes, but they're there to watch for something, not to threaten you. Something happened at the docks last night before I came here. Someone tried to kill me, and the money that paid for it traced back through 3 shell companies to an account inside my own organization." His voice remained completely flat. "I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because whatever your mother knows, whatever is connected to that ring, someone else is also looking for it, and they are not going to apologize for bothering you." Lily stared at him. She wanted to dismiss everything he had just said. She wanted to pick up her coffee pot and walk back to table 7 and stay in the simple, exhausting, manageable world of double shifts and insurance denials and the next month's rent. But she kept hearing her mother's voice. Never show that ring to a Moretti, especially not Victor. Not never show it to strangers. Not be careful. The specific name, the specific family. And the man sitting in front of her was a Moretti. "I don't trust you," she said. "You shouldn't," he said immediately. "You don't know me." "Then why would I tell you anything?" "You wouldn't. I'm not asking you to." He held her gaze steadily. "I'm asking you to tell me whether your mother is safe where she is right now." The question landed somewhere undefended, because Lily had left her mother with the neighbor from down the hall. Mrs. Kaminsky, who was 72 and watched television at full volume and would not hear a door being broken in over the sound of her game shows. And Lily had been too tired and too shaken to think through clearly what it meant that her mother had known that name, what it meant that someone had built Rebecca Bennett a false identity 15 years ago. What it meant that the ring she carried had apparently caused a criminal boss to freeze in his seat in the middle of the night. She was already reaching for her phone when the front door of the diner flew open. 2 men, moving fast, not the shuffling uncertainty of customers who weren't sure of the layout. Purposeful, direct. The way people move when they already know where they're going. They were not there to eat. The taller one looked straight at Lily and said, "Ms. Bennett, come with us." The whole diner went silent. The school teachers from last night back again with fresh coffee and their unfinished book debate stopped mid-sentence. Manny's voice from the kitchen cut off. The record on the jukebox spun, but nobody heard it. Lily did not move. Adrian was already standing. She would remember later, trying to reconstruct the next 60 seconds, that she did not see him reach for anything or signal anyone. He simply stood up and put himself between Lily and the 2 men, and his posture changed in a way that was hard to describe, except to say that the room got smaller. "Wrong diner," Adrian said quietly. The taller man's eyes shifted to Adrian, and something in his expression flickered. Recalculation. Uncertainty. But not enough of it. "Mr. Moretti, this doesn't involve you." "She's my guest," Adrian said. "So it does." Lily's hand found her phone. She was already dialing. From somewhere near the back of the diner, the direction of the rear exit, came a single sharp sound, the kind that stops conversations, and then Caleb Shaw's voice calm, as a man reading a weather report. "The one by the back door is handled. Adrian, we have a problem." "Tell me." "The phone on the tall one. I need you to see it." 3 minutes later in the parking lot, while 2 very unhappy men were being held by people, Lily could not quite see clearly. Caleb handed Adrian a phone, and Adrian looked at it for exactly 4 seconds, and then looked at Lily with an expression she had not seen from him yet. Not calm, not controlled, something raw underneath the surface. "This is your address," he said, showing her the screen. Her apartment building, her unit number satellite view, with the street name visible. "And this," he scrolled, "is a photograph of your mother." Lily's hand went cold. Someone had been outside Rebecca's window. Recently. The photo showed her mother in the kitchen, her kitchen, their kitchen with the blue curtains Lily had put up last spring, looking out toward the street. "They were paid," Caleb said, "through an account connected to our dock operations. Same trail as last night." Adrian and Caleb exchanged a look that communicated something compressed and urgent. "My mother," Lily said. Her voice came out lower than she intended. "Right now. I have to go to my mother right now." "My car," Adrian said, already moving. "Now." Lily did not argue. She did not stop to consider the strangeness of running toward the car of the man she had told 12 minutes ago that she did not trust. She did not stop to calculate the risk or review her options. She just ran. Because whoever these men were, whoever had her mother's photograph on their phone and her address in their contacts, and had found a way to funnel money through Adrian Moretti's own accounts, they had already been outside Rebecca Bennett's kitchen window. And Mrs. Kaminsky was 72 years old and watching television at full volume. And Rebecca Bennett, whoever she really was, and whatever secret she had been carrying for 25 years, was alone. They arrived at the apartment building in 8 minutes, which was 4 minutes faster than legally possible, and Lily was out of the car before it stopped moving. She took the stairs 2 at a time. She could hear from the second-floor landing the sound of Mrs. Kaminsky's television through the wall, some game show applause, the cheerful shriek of a wrong answer buzzer. She hit her floor. The door to her apartment was open. Not unlocked, not ajar. Open with the frame splintered where the lock had been, and the door itself pushed back against the wall. Inside, every drawer had been pulled out. The couch cushions were on the floor. The closet door hung open. The wooden box where her mother's jewelry lived was sitting on the kitchen counter with the lid up and the velvet square sitting beside it empty. The ring was gone, and there was no one in the apartment. Lily pressed both hands flat against the kitchen counter and breathed. "Mom," she said to the empty apartment to no one. "Mom." Then from behind her, from the direction of the hallway, a small sound. Fabric against floor. Movement inside the maintenance closet at the far end of the hall, the one Lily always meant to clean out, and never did, the one full of old boxes and a broken ironing board, and the musty smell of a space that never got enough air. She crossed the hall in 4 steps and pulled the door open. Rebecca was sitting on the floor of the closet with her knees pulled up and a metal cash box pressed against her chest. She was shaking. Her eyes were wide and frightened, and for a terrible second, Lily thought she was entirely absent, that the confusion had swallowed her completely. Then Rebecca looked at her daughter and said with perfect clarity, "I heard them coming. I remembered what Daniel said. He said if they ever come, take the box and find a small dark place and don't make a sound." Lily dropped to her knees on the closet floor and wrapped both arms around her mother. "You're okay," she said. "You're okay. I'm here." "Did they take the ring?" Rebecca asked. Lily pulled back and looked at her. "Yes. Mom, who is Daniel?" Rebecca's hands tightened around the metal cash box, and from the doorway behind Lily, Adrian Moretti's voice said quietly, "I think I know who Daniel is." Lily looked back at him. He was standing in the apartment doorway, not crossing the threshold. She noticed waiting to be invited in, and his face had gone through some kind of transformation she couldn't fully read. The controlled surface was still there, but beneath it, something had cracked slightly open. "My mother doesn't know you," Lily said, still on the floor of the closet. "She's not going to talk to you." "I know," Adrian said, "but she's not safe here. Neither are you." He looked at the splintered doorframe. "I have a house on the bay, security, a doctor I trust. I'm asking if you'll let me help." Lily looked at her mother. Rebecca was looking at Adrian with the kind of clear-eyed assessment that only broke through on her sharpest days. She studied his face for a long moment. Then she looked at the ring on his hand, the lighthouse with the lightning crack. "You look like him," Rebecca said, "around the eyes, like Julian." Adrian went very still. "Mom," Lily said carefully, "how do you know that name?" But Rebecca had already retreated back into the gentle fog, and she just looked at the cash box in her arms and said distantly, "Daniel said keep the box safe. Daniel said the box is how they'll know the truth." Adrian took a slow breath. Lily looked at him. She looked at her ruined apartment. She looked at her mother sitting in a closet shaking with a metal box she had protected with everything she had. "I'm not taking your money," Lily said to Adrian. "I'm not offering money. And I'm not agreeing to anything permanently." "Understood." "And if I feel for 1 second like you're using her or using me, you leave," he said. "With the box with your mother, and I won't stop you. You have my word." Lily did not know yet if Adrian Moretti's word was worth anything. She had no basis to measure it. But she looked at the empty velvet square on the kitchen counter and the broken lock on her door, and she thought about the photograph of her mother taken from outside their kitchen window, and she thought about a man at a diner at 2 a.m. who had gone absolutely unnaturally still at the mention of a ring. She thought about her mother's voice. Never show that ring to a Moretti, especially not Victor. There was one Moretti in front of her, and then there was Victor. She didn't know yet what the difference between those two things was, but she was beginning to think with the particular quiet certainty that came from years of reading rooms and reading people in the small hours of the morning that finding out might be the most important thing she had ever done. "All right," Lily said. She helped her mother to her feet, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand taking the cash box gently. "All right," she said again. And she walked out of the closet through the wrecked apartment past the splintered door and into whatever came next. The drive to the Chesapeake Bay estate took 40 minutes, and Lily spent most of it sitting in the back seat with her mother's head resting on her shoulder and the metal cash box wedged between her feet. She did not speak. Adrian did not speak either. Caleb drove, and the only sounds were the rain still hitting the windshield and Rebecca's shallow, even breathing as she drifted in and out of sleep. Lily watched the back of Adrian's head and thought about what her mother had said. "You look like him, around the eyes, like Julian." Her mother had known that name, had recognized a dead man's features in the face of a living one, and she had said it with the clarity that only broke through on her best days, the clarity that meant it was true, not confusion, not a dream she was mixing up with reality. Rebecca Bennett had known Julian Moretti, which meant Rebecca Bennett had known the Moretti family long before tonight, and she had spent 25 years hiding from that knowledge in a borrowed name and a false history. Lily pressed her cheek against the top of her mother's head and made herself breathe slowly. She was good at compartmentalizing. You had to be working double shifts while managing a sick parent and a pile of medical bills that never got shorter. You put the thing that was frightening you into a box, and you closed the lid, and you kept moving. You opened it later when you had time and space and enough sleep to handle what was inside. She was going to need a very large box for this one. The estate appeared through the rain like something from a different world. Not a mansion in the dramatic sense, no grand columns or iron gates with crests. But it was large, set back from the water on a private road with lights in every window that made it look inhabited and alive even at this hour. A woman met them at the door, mid-50s efficient, no wasted gestures, and her name, Lily would learn, was Mrs. Holt. And she ran the house with a quiet competence that reminded Lily of the best kind of shift manager. "The east bedroom for Mrs. Bennett," Adrian said, "and the room beside it for—" "I'll stay with my mother," Lily said. "The east room has 2 beds," Mrs. Holt said simply, and that was that. The doctor arrived within the hour. He was compact and precise, and he examined Rebecca with careful thoroughness, while Lily sat in the chair by the window and watched every movement of his hands and listened to every word he said. When he was done, he stepped out into the hallway and told Lily that her mother was stable, mildly dehydrated, and had likely experienced a significant stress response that had temporarily sharpened her cognition, a phenomenon he had seen before in patients with similar conditions. "The clarity she showed tonight," Lily said, "is that going to last? Probably not, but it may come back. Stress can do that, ring the bell, so to speak. Whether the bell keeps ringing depends on a lot of factors." He paused. "She's been without consistent medication management. These prescriptions," he handed Lily a list, "should have been filled 6 weeks ago." Lily looked at the list. She knew exactly why they hadn't been filled. "I can make arrangements," the doctor began. "I'll handle it," Lily said, quietly, firmly, the way she said everything that was not a question. She went back into the room and sat with her mother until Rebecca's breathing evened out into real sleep. Then she picked up the cash box and went looking for Adrian Moretti. She found him in a study at the far end of the hall, not behind a desk, the way powerful men like to position themselves, but sitting in an armchair with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up and a glass of something amber on the table beside him that he had not touched. He was looking at his hands, specifically at the ring. She sat down in the chair across from him without being invited and put the cash box on the low table between them. "Talk," she said. He looked up. Something in his face said he had expected her to sleep or to ask for something or to wait until morning. He had not expected this. "About what?" "About the ring. About what it means that my mother had one. About who Daniel is. About all of it." She held his gaze. "You said you thought you knew who Daniel was, so tell me." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket, which was folded over the arm of the chair, and took out his phone. He pulled up a photograph old scanned from a print, the colors slightly faded, and turned the screen toward her. 3 men stood on a dock. 2 of them she recognized a younger version of the face across from her, and beside him, a slightly older man with the same dark eyes and a wider smile, the kind of smile that lit up whatever room it was aimed at. The 3rd man stood slightly apart, shorter, wire-framed glasses, an accountant's posture slightly rounded at the shoulders, like a man who spent most of his life bent over numbers. On his right hand, clearly visible even in the faded photograph, was the ring. "The man on the left is my brother Julian," Adrian said. "The man with the glasses is Daniel Cross. He was the Moretti family accountant for 11 years. He paused. "He disappeared 15 years ago, the same week Julian died." "You thought he killed your brother?" "I knew he killed my brother." He said it without heat. The flatness of it was worse than anger would have been. Every piece of evidence pointed to Daniel. He moved money. He had access to the shipping schedules. He knew the warehouse layout. The fire was set from the inside. He looked at the photograph. "I spent 15 years certain of it. And now," he looked at the cash box on the table. "And now a woman I've never met has his ring, and she knew Julian's face, and she built herself an entirely new identity the same week he disappeared." He set the phone down. "Which means either Daniel gave her the ring before he ran, or he stopped. Or what? Or he gave it to someone he trusted to keep it safe, someone who couldn't protect herself with a name or a reputation or a gun." He looked at Lily directly. "Someone who needed to disappear as much as he did." The quiet between them had weight to it. Outside, the rain had eased from violent to persistent, the steady drumming of it against the windows filling the space where words might have been. "You need to tell me what you know about your mother's past," Adrian said. "I don't know anything. That's the whole problem." Lily put her hands on the cash box lid. "She never talked about before. I thought it was just some people are like that. Some people leave their history behind and start fresh. I didn't ask because she didn't want to be asked." She stopped. "I should have asked. You couldn't have known." "Don't do that," she said. "Don't be kind about it. I'm not looking for reassurance right now. I'm looking for information." He studied her for a moment. Then slowly he nodded. Something shifted, the slight loosening of a man who had been braced for something and found that it wasn't necessary. "The ring," he said. "There were 3 made. My father commissioned them in 1987. The seal of the original alliance, 3 families, 3 rings, 1 compact. My father's, Julian's, and Daniel's. When Julian died, I put his ring in the casket." He paused. "That leaves only Daniel's ring unaccounted for. And your mother had it. How did she get it?" "I think Daniel gave it to her. I think—" He stopped, pressed 2 fingers against his mouth for a second, thinking. "I think your mother was protecting something for him, and I think the cash box is part of it." They both looked at the cash box. "I haven't opened it," Lily said. "I know. It belongs to my mother. I know that too." Lily sat with that for a moment. Then she unlatched the lid. Inside, layered carefully under a piece of protective cloth, were papers. Old shipping invoices, the papers slightly yellowed at the edges, the typeface, the specific kind that belonged to the early 90s before everything went digital. A small notebook with a cracked spine, 3 photographs similar vintage to the one on Adrian's phone. And at the bottom, wrapped in another square of velvet exactly like the one the ring had been kept in, an old cassette tape, the kind that went with a handheld recorder. Lily picked up one of the shipping invoices and looked at it. Numbers, dock assignments, shipment weights and manifests and dates running down the left column. "These are cargo records," she said. "Moretti shipping," Adrian confirmed, leaning forward to look. 15 years old at least, maybe older. Lily turned the page sideways, then upright again. Her eye caught something. A small discrepancy, not in the cargo descriptions or the dock assignments, but in the numbers themselves. A pattern in the weight tallies that didn't follow the logic of the column. Numbers that repeated at irregular intervals in a sequence that was too precise to be coincidence. She had done 2 years of accounting coursework at night school between double shifts. She had quit when her mother's health declined, and the cost of continuing became impossible to justify. But the knowledge didn't leave just because the classroom did. "This isn't just a shipping invoice," she said. "What do you mean?" "These numbers here, the weight tallies in the 3rd column, they're not random. They're coded. Someone used the dock numbers and the shipment weights to build a second layer of information inside the document." She traced the pattern with her finger. I'd need time with all of them, but I think these invoices are a ledger, a hidden one." Adrian looked at her. Then he looked at the invoice, then back at her. "You can read that. I can see the structure. Reading it is going to take longer." She set the invoice down and looked at him with a directness that she could tell slightly unsettled him. "You thought these were business records." "They are business records. They're also something else. And whoever ransacked my apartment was looking for them, which means they knew what they contained." She closed the cashbox lid. "Which means someone else already knows there's a hidden ledger in here, and they didn't want you to find it." The look that crossed Adrian's face then was the look of a man who had just felt the ground shift under his feet. She had seen the beginning of it at the diner when she'd described the ring. This was further along the same process, faster, harder. "Who paid the men who came to the diner?" she asked. "You said it traced to an account in your organization." "Yes." "So someone inside your organization sent them?" "Yes." "Someone who knew about the ring, knew what it was connected to, knew enough to send men to my apartment to take it and take the box." She was leaning forward now, elbows on her knees. "Adrian, who inside your organization would want to stop you from finding Daniel Cross's evidence?" The name came to her and him at almost exactly the same moment. She saw it in his face, the sudden arrest of motion, the same stillness from the diner, but deeper this time, more fundamental, the kind of stillness that happens when a truth you have been keeping in your peripheral vision steps directly in front of you and refuses to be ignored any longer. He did not say the name, but the look on his face said everything. "Victor," Lily said quietly, because her mother had said it, and because the invoice in the cash box and the pattern in the numbers and the men at the diner and the photograph of Rebecca through a kitchen window all pointed in the same direction. Adrian stood up. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, and she let him have the silence because she had learned over years of working nights that some things needed a moment of quiet before they could become real. "After a long time," he said, "he raised me. After Julian died, he was the only family I had left." Lily said nothing. "Everything I know about this business, about how to run it, about how to survive in it, Victor taught me." Still, Lily said nothing. "He told me Daniel was responsible. He had documents. He had testimony. He had—" Adrian stopped. "He had everything I needed to believe him." "Because he built the case himself," Lily said. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Heavier. The weight of 15 years of misdirected grief pressing down through the floor of that study toward the water outside. "I don't know that yet," Adrian said, but his voice said he was already most of the way to knowing it. "The cassette tape," Lily said, "from the cash box. You have something that can play it." He turned from the window. "I'll find something." It took Caleb 20 minutes to locate an old cassette player from somewhere in the house. The kind of detail that Lily was beginning to understand was exactly what Caleb Shaw was for. He appeared in the doorway of the study, set it on the table without comment, and withdrew. The tape was old, and the audio quality was grainy, the kind of sound that had traveled through decades of magnetic deterioration. But the voices were still there, still identifiable, still capable of filling a room with something that felt like a hand reaching backward through time. The first voice was a man Lily didn't recognize, clipped and precise, going through numbers quickly, the cadence of someone reading from a document in front of him. The second transfer cleared through the Rotterdam account. Combined with the first, it covers the full contracted amount. Then a second voice, older, the particular smoothness of someone who had spent decades cultivating exactly how he sounded. "Good. And the warehouse arrangement, you're certain the timing is correct. Julian will be inside. The night crew gets paid to look the other way, starting at 9. And Daniel thinks he's bringing Julian the Rotterdam papers. He won't know what he's walking into until it's done." A pause. "Make sure he runs," the second voice said. "A dead accountant can't be blamed for anything. A missing accountant is a story that writes itself." The tape clicked. Silence. Lily realized she had stopped breathing. Across the room, Adrian Moretti was standing completely still with his arms at his sides and his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance that wasn't in the room at all. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't moving. He looked like a man who had just watched the entire architecture of his life collapse from a distance silently in slow motion and hadn't yet decided whether to scream. The second voice on the tape was Victor Moretti. She could not have known that before tonight, but she knew it now from the way Adrian's face looked. "Adrian," she said, He didn't respond. "Adrian." She stood up and moved slightly closer, not all the way, just enough that her voice would reach him without having to be raised. "Look at me." He looked at her. His eyes were dry. She would have expected something else, expected some cracking open of the surface, but they were dry and very dark and full of the specific kind of pain that has been contained for so long it doesn't know how to move. "He set Daniel up," Adrian said. His voice was flat. Not the controlled flatness from earlier, the flat of shock. Daniel wasn't running. Daniel was running because Victor arranged the explosion and then made sure Daniel was the only other person who could have done it. "Yes," Lily said. "My brother went to that warehouse thinking Daniel was bringing him documents. Victor told Julian to go. Victor set the time. Victor arranged the crew to look the other way." He stopped, started again. Julian trusted him. Julian would have walked into that building without a second thought because Victor said. He stopped. Lily didn't try to fill the silence. She had learned that night what her mother had spent 25 years knowing, and she understood something of what it was to discover that the story you had organized your entire life around was a story someone else had written for you. "He took 15 years from you," she said quietly. "He took Julian, and then he used your grief as a leash." Adrian looked at her. "That's what the evidence will show," she said. "All of it. The tape, the ledger, the invoices. Daniel Cross didn't kill Julian. He tried to stop it, and your uncle has been keeping you pointed in the wrong direction ever since." Something finally moved in Adrian's face. It wasn't grief exactly. It wasn't anger yet, though anger was coming. She could see it gathering somewhere behind the shock, like weather behind a mountain. It was something more complicated than either of those things. It was the look of a man realizing he had spent 15 years loving a ghost story someone else had written, and that the ghost had been innocent all along. "The men at the diner," he said. "The men at your apartment. Victor sent them." "Victor sent them," Lily confirmed. "He knew you'd gone to the diner, probably had someone watching you after the ambush at the docks. When you started asking about the ring, he knew what the ring meant. He knew Daniel might have left evidence." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He's been waiting 15 years for this, for Daniel's trail to surface." He looked at the cash box. "Your mother has been sitting on evidence that could destroy him for 25 years, and he never found her." "She disappeared," Lily said. "She disappeared completely. No name, no history. That was the whole point of starting over." She paused. "She's been protecting that box since before I was born, and she never told me because telling me would have put me in danger." "She protected you," Adrian said. "She protected everyone." Lily looked at the cash box. "Daniel Cross protected you, actually. He gathered the evidence. He gave the ring to my mother. He made sure someone would be able to find the truth someday." She looked up. "He must have known you'd come looking for him eventually. He must have known that if you found the evidence first before Victor could bury it." "Victor can't know we have the tape," Adrian said immediately. Back to himself now, or back to the version of himself that operated under pressure, that moved fast and thought ahead and calculated. "If he knows we have it, he moves first. He controls enough people in this city to bury all of us before we get within a mile of a federal prosecutor. So we need to verify everything in the cash box first," Lily said. "Everything, every invoice, every page of that notebook. We need to understand the full ledger before we do anything with the tape. That could take—" "I know." She met his eyes. "I'm the one who has to read it, so let me work." He looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't quite categorize, not surprise exactly, but something adjacent to it. The expression of a man who kept encountering a person who refused to behave the way people in his world typically behaved. "You need sleep," he said. "I need coffee," she said. "Then I need paper and a calculator in about 6 hours. Sleep comes after." He almost said something. She could see at the beginning of an argument the instinct toward authority. Then he stopped himself. "I'll get the coffee," he said. She sat down with the cash box open in front of her and pulled out the invoices one by one and started to lay them in order by date. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear in the specific, sharpened way that happened when there was important work to do and everything else had to wait. From the kitchen, she could hear Adrian moving. The particular sounds of a person who normally had everything done for them, learning to do something for themselves. The slightly too long search for the right cabinet, the briefly wrong setting on the machine, the small correction. He came back with 2 mugs and set one beside her without a word, and she didn't look up but said, "Thank you." And he sat across from her, and she felt him looking at the invoices, and then looking at her, and then choosing deliberately not to interrupt. They sat like that for 2 hours. At some point, without either of them acknowledging it, they had moved from the armchairs to the same side of the low table, both bent over the spread of invoices, Lily pointing out the coded sequences, and Adrian making notes in his own handwriting on a legal pad. Their coffee went cold and neither of them noticed. Twice Lily heard sounds from the east bedroom, and both times she stood up and checked on her mother and found Rebecca sleeping peacefully. And both times when she came back, Adrian was still in exactly the same position, still working, still focused, and something about that. The simple fact that he had not moved, had not used those minutes to examine anything in the box without her present registered in a part of her that she wasn't ready to examine yet. At 4 a.m., she found the center of the ledger. It was in a run of invoices from 1993, 8 months before Julian's death. The coded numbers, when read against the doc assignments, mapped a series of financial transfers, money moving out of the Moretti doc accounts and into 3 offshore structures that had no business connection to the shipping company. The amounts were not enormous on their own, but they accumulated. Across 18 months, the total was significant enough to fund a long-term operation, fund crew payments, fund a warehouse fire and the bribes required to make sure no one looked too closely at the source. And buried in the very last page, written in handwriting, different from the invoices, smaller, more deliberate, was a series of initials and account numbers. VM appeared 4 times, Victor Moretti. Lily set the page down carefully on the table. "There it is," she said. Adrian looked at the page. He didn't touch it. He just looked at it for a long time. "He stole from his own family," Adrian said, "from Julian's operation, used the money to pay for Julian's murder, and then he blamed the accountant who found out about the theft." "And raised you to finish the job," Lily said, "to hunt Daniel Cross, because if Daniel was ever found alive, he could explain what those account numbers meant." She paused. "Victor used your grief as a search engine. Every resource you spent looking for Daniel was a resource Victor didn't have to spend himself." Adrian pushed back from the table. He stood up. He walked to the window. Outside, the first pale line of morning was beginning at the edge of the water. "I need to think about how to move," he said. "Carefully," Lily said. "Victor still has people inside your organization. The dock ambush, the men at the diner, those were his people operating inside your structure. You don't know how many. You don't know which ones." "I know Caleb. That's one person. Caleb is worth 20. Adrian." She said his name with enough weight that he turned from the window. "You can't fight this the way you'd normally fight something. If you go after Victor with force, he'll use it. He'll say you're unstable. He'll spin the story. He controls the narrative with every captain and investor who's loyal to the family name. You have to do this legally, or you hand him exactly the exit he needs." He looked at her. "You sound like you've thought about this," he said. "I've been thinking about it for the last 4 hours. She held up the page with the initials. "This goes to federal prosecutors, all of it. The invoices, the notebook, the tape, everything. But before it does, I need to make copies of everything in this box, and they need to go somewhere Victor can't reach. Multiple places." "You're describing a strategy," he said. He was not saying it critically. He was saying it the way someone says something when they are genuinely surprised and too tired to be guarded about the surprise. "I'm describing the only strategy that ends with both of us not in a concrete room somewhere," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Why are you helping me? You owe me nothing. You owe this family nothing." She picked up her cold coffee and looked at him over the rim of it and said, "I'm not helping you. I'm helping my mother. My mother spent 25 years silent because she believed it was the only way to keep me safe." She set the cup down. "That ends now. All of it ends now. Which means Victor ends, and the only clean way to end Victor is the way Daniel Cross intended from the beginning." "Daniel," Adrian said slowly. "He planned this. He knew someday someone would find the ring. He knew the box would surface if enough time passed and the right person looked." He paused. "He planned for me to find it." "He planned for someone like you to find it," Lily said. "Someone inside the family with enough standing to make the evidence mean something. Someone who had been lied to long enough to be angry about it." She paused. He gambled that the truth was stronger than Victor's version of the story. He just needed the evidence to survive long enough to prove it. Adrian looked at the spread of invoices, at the photograph from the dock, at the tape recorder sitting silent on the corner of the table, at all of it laid out in the early morning light, Daniel Cross's long-preserved testimony finally visible after 15 years of waiting in a closet in a cashbox in the careful keeping of a woman who had remade herself from nothing. "He was innocent," Adrian said. "He was innocent," Lily confirmed. There was a silence that felt to Lily like something setting, like concrete when it cures the moment when something stops being liquid and uncertain and becomes solid and permanent and real. From down the hall came the soft sound of a door opening, and then her mother's voice, slightly confused, asking where the kitchen was. Lily was on her feet before the third word. She got to the hallway and found Rebecca standing in the doorway of the east bedroom in her nightgown, blinking at the unfamiliar walls with the gentle bewilderment of someone who had woken up in a story they didn't remember starting. "I'm here, Mom," Lily said, reaching her, taking her hands. "It's okay. We're somewhere safe." "This isn't our apartment," Rebecca said. "No, we're at a friend's house for now." Rebecca looked past her toward the end of the hall where Adrian had appeared in the study doorway. She looked at him for a moment with eyes that were soft and uncertain. Then she said clearly enough to carry, "Is Daniel safe?" Adrian moved forward slowly. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at Rebecca Bennett, this woman who had carried his brother's truth through a quarter-century of silence, and he said gently, "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out." Rebecca nodded, as if that was enough, as if she had been waiting for someone to say exactly those words for a very long time. "That's good," she said softly. "Daniel was a good man. He was so afraid." She let Lily guide her back toward the bed. "He said someday someone would come who was ready to hear the truth. He said the ring would tell them where to look." Lily settled her mother back under the covers and sat on the edge of the bed and held her hand until her eyes closed again. Behind her in the doorway, she felt rather than heard Adrian standing. She did not turn around. She just sat with her mother's hand in both of hers and listened to the morning arriving outside the rain. Finally finished the first birds beginning their argument with the quiet, the water on the bay shifting from black to gray to the first pale suggestion of blue. 25 years of silence coming slowly apart. And somewhere in the city they had left behind, Victor Moretti was waking up and reaching for his phone, checking to see whether his men had recovered what needed to be recovered, not yet knowing that they had failed, not yet knowing that the evidence he had spent 15 years hunting was sitting in a study 30 miles away, fully laid out, fully read, and fully understood. Not yet knowing that the tired waitress who had started this entire chain of events with 8 careless words at 2 a.m. had turned out to be the one person in Baltimore who knew exactly how to read what Daniel Cross had hidden, and that she had spent the night reading every word. Caleb came back at 7 a.m. with coffee he had made himself and the expression of a man who had been awake all night processing information and had arrived at conclusions he did not enjoy. He set the coffee on the table, looked at the spread of invoices, looked at Lily, looked at Adrian and said, "The second shell company traces to a law firm in Delaware. The law firm has one client of record in Baltimore." He paused. "Victor Moretti." Nobody said anything. "The dock ambush," Caleb continued, "was organized through a burner network we've been seeing on the east side for about 8 months. We always assumed it was a rival crew. It wasn't." He put his phone on the table with a screen full of transaction records. "It was ours. Specifically, it was the operations budget that Victor controls independently, the discretionary account he's held since before Adrian took over primary management." Adrian picked up the phone and looked at the screen and set it back down without a word. "How long has he been running parallel operations?" Adrian asked. "At least 3 years that I can document. Probably longer." Caleb looked directly at him. "Adrian, he's been positioning himself to take full control. The legitimate investors, the union captains, the Port Authority contacts, he's been cultivating them separately from you for 3 years. He has relationships you don't know about, loyalty arrangements that bypass you entirely." Lily looked at Adrian. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were steady. She had spent enough time in the last 6 hours watching him process information to understand the difference between his controlled face and his actually calm face. This was the controlled one. "He's been building the case," Adrian said. "If I disappeared accident criminal charge, whatever he would step in as the natural successor. The grieving uncle, the steady hand." "Exactly what he did after Julian," Caleb said. The word landed in his room like a stone dropped into still water. All 3 of them felt the ripple. "He's done this before," Lily said quietly, not a question. He's done this before, Adrian confirmed. She watched him stand up and walk to the window with his coffee, and she watched the set of his shoulders, and she understood that what was happening inside him right now was not just anger at Victor. It was something harder to name, the particular grief of a person who realizes that the family they thought they had was a performance carefully staged by someone who had never loved them at all. "The lighthouse," she said. Both men looked at her. She had been turning her mother's words over since the night before, fitting them against the invoices and the coded ledger numbers. With the same patient attention, she gave every accounting problem, not forcing the pieces, letting the structure reveal itself. "My mother said it right before she went back to sleep that first night. The lighthouse opens when the broken halves meet." She looked at Adrian's ring, then at the empty velvet square in the cash box, where her mother's ring had been before the men took it. 2 rings, 2 halves of the same crest. The invoices use doc numbers as code, but they don't have an endpoint. The ledger encodes transactions without identifying the final destination account. It's incomplete. "You're saying Daniel split the evidence," Adrian said. "I'm saying Daniel built a lock with 2 keys. The ring you're wearing is 1 half. My mother's ring is the other. And whatever they open when they're together isn't a bank account or a legal brief. It's a physical location." She held his gaze. "The North Point lighthouse, the old one. It's been decommissioned for 20 years, but it's still standing." Caleb pulled out his phone. "North Point Lighthouse," Lily continued, "was part of the original Moretti dock territory. It's listed in 3 of the invoices not as a destination, but as a reference point for the coded coordinates. I didn't understand why a decommissioned lighthouse kept appearing in shipping records until I mapped the dock numbers against the actual Baltimore waterfront grid." She turned one of the invoices around so they could see what she had marked. "These aren't dock references. They're directional coordinates using the lighthouse as a fixed point. Daniel hid something there, something that completes the ledger." The silence that followed had a specific quality, the quality of a room in which everyone present has just arrived at the same conclusion simultaneously and is taking a half-second to confirm that they all see the same thing. "A sealed compartment," Adrian said. "If Daniel used the lighthouse as a dead drop, then whatever is inside has been sitting there for 15 years, Caleb said, "waiting." "We need to move today," Adrian said. "We need my mother's ring," Lily said. Another silence, this one less clean. "Victor has it," Caleb said. "Then we need to get it back." She looked at Adrian. "Can you get it without tipping him off that we have everything else?" Adrian thought about that. She watched him think the real version, not the performance of thinking, the actual turning of variables. She had learned the difference in the past 8 hours. "Victor knows the ring is significant," Adrian said slowly. "He took it because he didn't want it reaching me. But he doesn't know about the lighthouse connection. He doesn't know the ring's function as a key. He just knows it's a Moretti seal ring, and it should not have been in your mother's possession." He paused. "Which means he's sitting on it, but he doesn't know what to do with it yet. He'll be waiting to see how I move before he makes his next decision." "Then you don't move visibly," Lily said. "You let him think you're pursuing the ring through regular channels. Give him something to watch. While Caleb goes to the lighthouse," Adrian said. Caleb nodded once, already reaching for his jacket. "Not alone," Adrian said. "I'm faster alone." "You're also wounded." Adrian said it without apology. Caleb had a gash along his left forearm from the encounter at the rear exit of the diner, which he had bandaged himself sometime in the night without mentioning to anyone. "Take Park. Park talks too much. Park talks the right amount when it matters. Take him." Caleb left without further argument. That was one of the things Lily was beginning to understand that made Caleb genuinely valuable. He disagreed out loud, stated his position, and then accepted the decision and moved with full commitment. No resentment, no hedging. He reminded her slightly of herself. After he left the study, felt larger and quieter. Adrian turned to Lily. "You need to sleep," he said. "I need to check on my mother." "After that, you need to sleep. You've been up for—" He glanced at his watch, going on 22 hours. "So have you." "I'm used to it." "So am I." She picked up her cold coffee. "When Victor calls you today and he will, what are you going to say?" "That I'm following the ring lead and I'll update him when I have something concrete." "He'll want to meet." "Probably." "Don't meet him alone." Adrian looked at her. Not irritated, she had expected irritation, but something more like the expression of someone who has been managing alone for a very long time and is not sure what to do with the concept of someone else being present for the managing. I've met with Victor alone for 15 years, he said. I know, she said. And for 15 years he was 3 steps ahead of you. Today you have the ledger, the tape, and the lighthouse. Stop meeting the future with the habits of the past. She held his gaze steadily. Trust the people you trust. All of them, including Caleb, including... She paused, because this next part was not easy to say and she knew it, eventually including a prosecutor. You're asking me to hand federal investigators a map of every illegal operation I've personally authorized for the past 12 years. I'm asking you to decide which matters more. She set down the cup. Your freedom from prosecution or the truth about what happened to Julian? He was quiet for a long time. Outside, somewhere on the bay, a boat horn sounded, low and long and indifferent to everything happening in that room. Both, he finally said. I want both. Then you need an attorney before you do anything else. Someone you chose, not someone Victor introduced you to. She moved toward the door. I'm going to check on my mother, then I'm going to sleep for 4 hours, and then I'm going to be here when Caleb calls from the lighthouse. That's the plan. She left him standing by the window with the morning coming in around him, and she thought walking down the hall toward her mother's room that she had never in her life met anyone quite as capable and quite as alone as Adrian Moretti, and that those two things were connected in a way that took someone standing close enough to see clearly. Her mother was awake. Not the sharp clarity of the night before, but a gentler wakefulness, the warm, present version of Rebecca that Lily loved best, the one that recognized her face and her voice and reached for her hand without hesitation. You look terrible, Rebecca said. Lily laughed. It came out slightly ragged around the edges. Good morning to you too. Sit down. Rebecca patted the edge of the bed. You've been up all night. A lot happened. Tell me. So Lily sat on the edge of the bed and held her mother's hand and told her carefully and simply what they had found in the cashbox. The coded ledger, the tape, Victor's voice arranging the fire, the initials in the invoice, the lighthouse. Rebecca listened without interrupting. That was the thing about her mother on her clear days. She had a quality of listening that made you feel completely received. Every word landing exactly where it was meant to. When Lily finished, Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Daniel was so careful. He thought of everything. He protected you, Lily said. He gave you the ring and told you to disappear. He knew Victor would come for anyone connected to the evidence. He came the week after Julian died, Rebecca said. Her voice was even the way someone's voice gets when they have spent years processing a thing until it no longer has the power to break them. Victor, he came to Daniel's apartment and I was there. I was always there. I worked with Daniel. I helped him with the books. Victor didn't know that. He thought I was just the cleaning woman. She paused. He told Daniel that if the Rotterdam papers ever surfaced, everyone Daniel had ever spoken to would be held responsible. He said it the way you say good morning, just ordinary like it was nothing. Lily felt cold despite the blankets and the morning warmth. Daniel told me to take the box and the ring and go, Rebecca said. He told me to build a new life somewhere no one would look for a cleaning woman. He said someday the truth would surface. He said he was going to make sure it survived even if he didn't. What happened to Daniel, Mom? Rebecca looked at their joined hands. I don't know. I left that night. I never heard from him again. She paused. I hoped he made it. I still hope. Lily pressed her mother's hand between both of hers. The man in this house, Rebecca said. The one who looks like Julian. He wants justice for his brother. Yes. Is he a good man? Lily thought about that. The $100 bill on the diner table, the order to Caleb, nobody threatens them, the way he had stood between her and 2 armed men in a room full of terrified customers, the way he had waited in the doorway of her ruined apartment, not crossing the threshold, asking instead of demanding, the way he had sat across from her for 6 hours reading invoices and not once touched the cashbox contents without her permission. And then she thought about the other things she knew, the operations Caleb had described, the 12 years of authorizations. The world Adrian had lived in so long, he had stopped being able to see its edges clearly. He's trying to be, she said. I think he's been trying for a while and didn't know how. Rebecca nodded, like that was the right answer, the honest one, not the comfortable one. Then help him, Rebecca said. Not because he deserves it, because Julian did. Lily slept for 4 hours and 20 minutes, which was more than she expected and less than she needed. She woke to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand, a number she didn't recognize, and then a text from Adrian. Caleb called. "Come to the study." She was down the hall in under 2 minutes. Adrian was on his feet when she walked in, and the look on his face was one she had not seen before, something raw and forward-leaning, the expression of a man who has just received information that confirms the worst and the best simultaneously. "Caleb found it," he said. She stopped in the doorway. "Sealed compartment in the base of the lighthouse, built into the original foundation. You'd never find it unless you knew where to look, and the only way to know where to look was to map the invoice coordinates exactly the way you did." He held up his phone. On the screen was a photograph. Caleb had sent a metal box, older and more weathered than the cash box from Rebecca's closet, sitting open on a concrete surface. Inside, a ledger, thick, bound in oilcloth, and beside it, a photograph and a sheaf of documents. Daniel's complete financial ledger. Every transaction Victor ran through the Moretti accounts from 1989 to 1994. Every transfer, every offshore destination, every payment. He set the phone down, including the payments for the warehouse, broken down by date, amount, and recipient. Lily exhaled slowly. "It's everything," Adrian said. "It's everything," she agreed. "Caleb is bringing it now. 3 hours. Okay," she sat down. "Then we have 3 hours to figure out what to do with it." She looked at him. "Has Victor called?" "An hour ago." Adrian's expression shifted slightly. "He's called a meeting, this evening. The shipping headquarters, senior captains, business partners, investors." He paused. "He says there's been concerning activity within the organization, and he wants to address it collectively." The cold feeling was back. "He's moving," Lily said. "He thinks I'm isolated. He thinks the ring led me to your mother's records, and now I'm scrambling." Adrian's voice was controlled, but she heard what was underneath it. "He wants to present his version of events to every person with standing in this organization before I have the chance to present mine." "Then we go tonight," Lily said. Adrian looked at her sharply. "To the meeting," she clarified, "with the ledger, with the tape, with everything Caleb brings back from the lighthouse." She held his gaze. "You walk into that room with 3 hours of evidence, and you don't give Victor the chance to build the story first." "Lily." He said her name with the particular weight of someone about to say something they expect to be argued with. "This isn't a boardroom disagreement. Victor will have armed men at that meeting. If he feels cornered in front of his own investors and captains and partners, his options get very small very fast," she said. "Victor's power is the story he tells, the respected elder, the steady hand, the man who held the family together through tragedy." She leaned forward. "You take away the story in front of the audience that believes it, and what's left?" "A man with nothing to lose," Adrian said. "A man who has already lost," she said. "There's a difference." He was quiet. "You're not afraid of him," he said. It came out slightly wondering, like something he was just now observing and not sure what to do with. "I'm terrified of him," she said plainly. "But I spent last night reading Daniel Cross's life work. He spent years building the truth carefully enough that it could survive everything Victor threw at it. I'm not going to let it sit in a box for another 15 years because I was too scared to walk into a room." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Outside, Lily heard Mrs. Holt's voice in the hallway and her mother's lighter answer and the sound of mourning moving through the house, the way it moved through houses where people were actually living and not just surviving. "I need to make 2 calls," Adrian said. "The attorney and I'm calling the right one this time, not the one Victor recommended. And a federal contact. Someone Caleb has used before, someone clean." He picked up his phone. "I need you to copy everything in the cash box, every invoice, every page of the notebook, the tape recording." He looked at her directly. "And I need you to send it somewhere Victor can't reach." "I can use the diner manager's laptop," she said. "He's been trying to reach me since yesterday. If I explain the situation, you trust him." She thought of Frank, who had covered her shifts 3 times when her mother was hospitalized and had never once mentioned it to anyone else, who kept a spare key to the diner under a loose brick because he believed that people who needed a safe place to eat at 2 in the morning deserved to be able to get in. "Yes," she said, "I trust him." "Then make the copies. Send them to 3 separate locations, 1 to the federal contact. I'm going to give you 1 to a journalist. Caleb knows one too." He paused. Every legitimate investor in the Moretti Shipping Company who has a private email not connected to our internal systems. She understood what he was doing. Not just building a case, building a situation in which the case could not be suppressed. A web of recipients wide enough that no single person, not Victor, not a corrupt official, not anyone could intercept all of them before the information reached people with the power and the motivation to act on it. "There's one more thing," she said. "What?" "A failsafe. Something automatically releases everything, all of it, to every recipient simultaneously if I don't actively cancel the transmission before midnight tonight." Adrian stared at her. "That way," she said, "if Victor tries to make anyone disappear before the meeting." "The files go public anyway," he finished. "The files go public anyway." He was quiet for a second. Then, "You thought of this." "I thought of it at 4 a.m. between the second and third invoice." "Between the second and third invoice," he repeated very quietly, and she could not tell if it was admiration or disbelief or both, and she decided not to ask. "Make your calls," she said. "I'll start the copies." She spent the next 2 hours at the study desk with Frank's laptop. Frank had driven it out himself, taken one look at the situation, said, "Lily, you could have just asked me," with the tiredness of someone who had known her long enough to know she never asked for anything, and driven back to open the diner. She photographed every invoice, every page of the notebook, the tape recording transferred to digital audio through a method Caleb had set up remotely. She built the file package, methodically labeled everything, clearly wrote a single-page cover document that explained in plain language what each piece of evidence represented and how they connected to each other. At one point, her hands stilled over the keyboard. She sat there for a moment thinking about Rebecca in 1994, starting over with nothing but a false name and a metal box and the ring on her finger. About Daniel Cross, whoever and wherever he was building a truth, careful enough to survive a quarter-century of active suppression. About Julian Moretti, who had walked into a warehouse trusting his uncle and never come back out. About what it cost people to tell the truth when the people with the power to silence them had already decided they wouldn't. She finished the document. She set up the failsafe. She sent everything. Then she went to find Adrian. Howe was in the kitchen, which surprised her. Mrs. Holt was there, but so was her mother, sitting at the kitchen table in a chair she had evidently relocated from the living room, watching Adrian attempt to make sandwiches with the specific, focused effort of a man who did not normally make sandwiches. Rebecca was offering commentary. "You're cutting it wrong," Rebecca said. "There's a right way to cut a sandwich. Diagonally. It tastes better diagonally." "That makes no sense." "Try it." Adrian tried it. He looked at the result. He ate the corner piece. He looked mildly, involuntarily surprised. "Don't tell me I'm right," Rebecca said. "I'm not telling you anything," Adrian said, and put the plates on the table and caught Lily's eye across the kitchen, and something moved through his expression that was so unguarded it almost startled her. Not quite a smile, but the way a face looks right before it remembers how to make one. She sat down. They ate. It was Lily, thought the strangest thing that had happened in a day full of strange things, sitting in a kitchen on the Chesapeake Bay, eating diagonally cut sandwiches with the man the city was afraid of, and her mother who might or might not remember this tomorrow, and outside a car was coming with 15 years of concealed truth in a weathered metal box. But she thought that this was also, underneath all of it, the most human thing. That people who had every reason to be formal and careful and defended were sitting at a kitchen table cutting sandwiches wrong and being corrected about it, and that this was what kept people from becoming completely hollow. The ordinary things, the cup of coffee at 4 a.m, the diagonal cut. Caleb's car pulled in at 2:15 in the afternoon. He came in carrying the weathered box, set it on the study table, and opened it without ceremony. The oilcloth ledger was exactly what the photograph had shown. Complete, meticulous, the specific quality of Daniel Cross's handwriting that she recognized from the notebook. Small, deliberate, the hand of someone who understood that the details were everything, and the details had to last. Adrian picked it up and held it for a long time without opening it. "He kept this for 15 years, he said. "He kept it forever," Caleb said. "That lighthouse isn't exactly a tourist destination." "He never went back for it," Lily said. "He left it there and he built my mother a new life, and he trusted that someday it would be enough." She paused. "That's what faith looks like when you can't do anything else." Adrian opened the ledger to the first page. At the top, in Daniel Cross's precise handwriting, were 4 words. For Julian. Find this. Adrian closed the ledger. He did not turn away, but his jaw tightened, and he pressed his lips together in the specific way of someone who is not going to fall apart in front of other people, and is using every available resource to make sure that remains true. Lily looked at Caleb. Caleb looked back at her. Neither of them said anything. After a moment, Adrian said, "We go tonight." "Tonight," Caleb confirmed. "Lily." He looked at her. "You don't have to come. You've done—" "Don't," she said. He stopped. "I'm coming," she said. "I'm the one who set up the failsafe. I'm the one with the account access to cancel it if we succeed. If something goes wrong in that room tonight, the files go public at midnight regardless." She held his gaze. "So I need to be there to make sure something doesn't go wrong." Adrian looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Caleb. Caleb made a small gesture that communicated without words, something like, "I told you, stop underestimating her." "Fine," Adrian said. "We leave at 6. "I need an hour with my mother first," Lily said. "You have 2. She went back to the east bedroom and sat with Rebecca in the afternoon quiet and told her what was happening that evening. Rebecca listened with the careful attention of her clearer hours. When Lily finished, Rebecca reached up and touched her daughter's face with one hand. "Your father would have liked this," she said. "The way you think, the way you don't stop." Lily went very still. "My father." Rebecca's eyes were present and clear. "He was a good man, an honest man. He worked the docks for 20 years, and he never took a dollar that wasn't his. When he found out what Victor was doing to the dock workers, skimming their pension funds, falsifying safety reports, he went to Daniel. He said someone had to know." She paused. "Victor found out." Lily's heart was hammering. "He died in an accident," Rebecca said. 3 weeks after he talked to Daniel, an equipment failure, the kind that doesn't happen unless someone helps it happen." She looked at her daughter steadily. "I left Baltimore because I didn't want you to grow up knowing what kind of world took your father from us. I thought silence was safer than truth." She stopped. "I was wrong. I know that now." Lily could not speak for a moment. Her father, an honest dock worker who had died trying to do the right thing, a man she had never known, had never been given the chance to know, because Victor Moretti had decided that honesty at the wrong moment was a problem to be solved permanently. She reached for her mother's hand. "You kept me alive," she said when she could speak. "That wasn't cowardice, that was love." "Both things can be true," Rebecca said. "It was love, and it cost us both something we never got back." Lily sat with that, with the weight of it, the specific grief of a history that had been kept from you not out of cruelty but out of fear, and the way that grief and the love it came from occupied the same space in the chest, inseparable. Then she stood up. She pressed a kiss to her mother's forehead. "Tonight it costs Victor Moretti everything," she said, and she went to get ready for the meeting. At 5:30, standing in the hallway outside the study in the clothes she had borrowed from Mrs. Holt because everything she owned was in a ransacked apartment across the city, Lily took out her phone and checked the failsafe timer. 11 files, 7 recipients, automatic release at midnight. She put the phone in her pocket. She walked into the study where Adrian was standing with his jacket on and his face composed into the version of itself that the city knew, the controlled surface, the careful eyes, the posture that said, "I have made my decision, and it is final." But she had been watching him for nearly 2 days now, and she could see underneath it something that had not been there when he walked into the Harbor Light Diner at 2 in the morning with wet knuckles and no appetite for conversation. I was not carrying it alone anymore. She did not say that out loud. She just picked up the oilcloth ledger from the table and tucked it under her arm and said, "Ready?" Adrian looked at her. Then he looked at Caleb. Then he looked at the door. "Let's go end this," he said. The Moretti shipping headquarters sat 3 blocks from the waterfront, and by the time Adrian's car turned onto the access road at 6:45 in the evening, Lily could count 4 additional vehicles already parked along the side entrance, not the kind of vehicles that belong to shipping executives arriving for a routine meeting. 2 dark, 2 deliberately positioned engines still warm. Victor had not come to talk. "He brought muscle," Caleb said from the driver's seat. His voice carried no particular alarm the way a doctor's voice carries no alarm when confirming a diagnosis they already expected. "How many?" Adrian asked. 4 cars, maybe 2 men each, plus whoever was already inside. Caleb checked his mirror. He's not planning a conversation, Adrian. Neither am I. Adrian looked at Lily. Last chance to stay in the car. She already had the oilcloth ledger under one arm and her phone in her other hand with the fail-safe screen open. Drive, she said. Caleb drove. The lobby of the building was the particular kind of corporate formal that belongs to organizations that want to appear legitimate without committing too hard to the performance marble floors framed photographs of ships and harbor sunsets, a reception desk staffed by a man who wore a suit jacket, and the expression of someone who had learned not to ask questions. He saw Adrian and stood. He saw the ledger under Lily's arm and the expression on Caleb's face, and he sat back down and found something very important to look at on his computer screen. They took the elevator to the 4th floor. The boardroom ran the length of the eastern wall, and through the glass panels beside the door, Lily could see that it was already full. 8 men seated around the long table. She recognized the types, if not the faces, the specific posture of men who held authority in different forms, the captains and the investors, and the port contacts that Caleb had described. At the head of the table in the chair that was slightly larger than the others, in the way that power always arranges its furniture, sat Victor Moretti. I was 71 years old, and he looked like someone had spent 7 decades carefully constructing the appearance of a trustworthy man. Silver hair impeccably kept, a charcoal suit with no visible wrinkle, the kind of face that default settled into an expression of measured concern, the look of someone always ready to be the most reasonable person in any room. He was already speaking when they opened the door. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes went to Adrian first, a fraction of a second of calculation so fast that most people would have missed it entirely, and then to Lily, and then to the ledger under her arm, and Lily watched something move through his expression that was there and gone in the same instant. Not fear, not yet. Assessment. The rapid inventory of a man who has been managing threats his entire life, reclassifying an unexpected variable. Adrian, Victor said, warmly, openly. The performance was extraordinary. I wasn't certain you'd make it. Please sit down. His eyes moved to Lily. I'm afraid this is a private meeting. She's with me, Adrian said. He did not raise his voice. He did not move toward his seat. He stood just inside the door with his hands loose at his sides and let the silence extend 1 beat past comfortable. And I think we should let her stay, given that she's the reason we're all here. Victor's eyes moved to the ledger again, back to Adrian's face. The assessment was happening faster now. Lily could almost see the calculations running. You've had a difficult few days, Victor said, his voice shifting into the register of patient authority, the tone of a man speaking to someone who needs to be handled carefully. I understand. The incident at the docks, the situation with the woman from the diner. Her name is Lily Bennett, Adrian said, and her mother is Rebecca Bennett, formerly known as Rebecca Cross. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of men waiting for a meeting to begin. The specific quiet of men who have just heard a name that means something and are recalibrating what they know. Victor did not move. He was very good at not moving. I don't recognize that name, he said. No, Adrian said. You wouldn't. You worked hard to make sure she stopped existing in 1994. He walked forward and Lily walked beside him, and Caleb took a position near the door with the particular quality of stillness that communicated to anyone paying attention that the door was not going to become a useful exit. Daniel Cross's sister, Victor, his sister. She was in his apartment the night you came to threaten him. You thought she was the cleaning woman. One of the men at this table, heavy-set older, the specific weathered look of a man who had spent decades on water, leaned slightly forward. Victor, what is he talking about? Nothing to concern yourself with, Sal, Victor said, still smooth, still controlled. Adrian is under a great deal of stress, and he's been given some misleading information by people who have reasons to undermine this family. This family, Adrian said, and the 2 words came out with a weight that filled the room, has been built on a lie for 15 years, and everyone in this room has been living inside that lie without knowing it. He looked around the table, not aggressive, not threatening, just steady and present and honest in a way that Lily thought might be the most dangerous thing in the room. My brother didn't die because of Daniel Cross. Julian died because of the man sitting at the head of this table. The silence after that was complete. Victor stood up. I'm going to ask you. he said, his voice still measured, but with something underneath it now, something that had not been there before, the specific pressure of a man who has maintained control for a very long time and can feel it beginning to slip. To stop this, right now, before you say something in front of witnesses that you cannot take back. I've already said it, Adrian said, and the witnesses are the point. Lily set the oilcloth ledger on the table. She did it deliberately. Not with drama, she just placed it flat on the polished surface in the center of the table where everyone could see it. And she opened it to the page she had bookmarked, and she turned it so the writing faced the men seated around the table. "My name is Lily Bennett," she said. Her voice was clear and even. "I'm an accounting student. I also work as a waitress, which is how I met Adrian 2 days ago. Last night I spent 6 hours reading coded shipping invoices that Daniel Cross built into the Moretti financial records between 1989 and 1994. She looked around the table. "This ledger is Daniel's complete financial record. Every offshore transfer, every shell company, every payment, including the payments for the warehouse fire that killed Julian Moretti." The heavy-set man named Sal said, "Where did you get that?" "North Point Lighthouse," she said. Daniel Cross built a dead drop 15 years ago, a sealed compartment in the original foundation. He left the ledger there, and he encoded the location into the shipping invoices using the dock grid as a coordinate system. She paused. He left it there because he knew that someday someone inside this family would start asking the right questions, and he wanted to make sure the truth was waiting for them when they did. Victor moved first. He came around the end of the table faster than a 71-year-old man had any right to move, and the thing that happened next happened in the space of about 4 seconds. A door at the back of the boardroom opened. One of his men from outside, responding to something, a signal Lily hadn't seen, and Adrian moved in the same instant, putting himself between Victor and the table, and Caleb's voice came from the door behind them. "The man coming through the back has been handled. There are 2 more in the stairwell who've decided to wait." Victor stopped. He was 3 feet from Adrian. The two of them looked at each other across that distance, and Lily, watching from beside the table, thought that this was what 15 years of grief and misdirection looked like when it finally ran out of room to hide. It looked like 2 men who had loved the same person and been shaped by the same loss, standing 3 feet apart, with the truth laid out on the table between them. "You don't know what you have," Victor said. His voice had lost the smoothness now. Not gone entirely, the instinct toward performance was too deeply ingrained, but rougher underneath the original architecture showing through. "You don't understand what I built here. What I had to do to keep this family alive after your father died after Julian. Do you have any idea what it cost?" "It cost Julian," Adrian said. "Julian was going to destroy everything your grandfather built. He was going to hand it to lawyers and regulators and walk away from 30 years of—" "He was going to make it honest," Adrian said. The flatness was back. "That's what you couldn't accept. Not that he was weak, that he was better than you." Something finally cracked in Victor's face. Not remorse. Lily had been watching for remorse, and it wasn't there. What broke through was something more fundamental and more frightening, the expression of a man who has maintained a story for so long that losing the story feels like losing himself. "You have nothing," Victor said. "A ledger from a dead drop, a woman nobody knows, a tape that any decent attorney will challenge." "The tape is already with a federal prosecutor," Lily said. Victor looked at her. "The ledger is already with 3 separate investigators and a journalist," she continued. "The coded invoices, the offshore account records, the November 1994 payment records, and a cover document explaining exactly how each piece connects to Julian Moretti's death. It was sent from 6 different locations to 7 different recipients, and if I don't cancel the automatic release in," she checked her phone, 4 hours and 12 minutes, "it goes public simultaneously to every recipient on the list, including every legitimate investor in this company." She held his gaze. "You can't suppress all of it. There's too many copies, too many places. It's done." Sal pushed his chair back and stood up. He looked at the ledger on the table. He looked at Victor. He looked at the ledger again. "Victor," he said, his voice carrying the heaviness of a man who has just watched something he built over decades begin to come apart at the foundation. "Tell me this isn't real." Victor said nothing. "Tell me that ledger isn't what she says it is." Still nothing. Sal looked at the other men around the table, the inventory of a room reading itself, each person doing the rapid calculation of what this moment meant for them personally, for their exposure, for their futures. "I need to call my attorney," said the man at the far end of the table. "So do I," said another. The room began to move, not chaos-controlled retreat, the specific, purposeful movement of men who have been in dangerous situations before and know how to exit one efficiently. They were not running from Victor. They were running from the story, from the version of reality that had collapsed the moment Lily set that ledger on the table. Victor watched them go with the expression of someone watching something they built fall, and Lily understood watching him that this was worse than anger would have been. Anger would have meant there was still something to fight. This was the expression of a man who has finally run out of story. He turned to Adrian. "You're going to destroy everything," he said. "Everything I built, everything this family." "The family you built was built on Julian's grave," Adrian said. "I'm not destroying it. I'm just done pretending the foundation is solid." Victor's hand moved. Lily saw it before Adrian did the specific micro-movement of a man reaching for something that had been a habit for a very long time. She did not think. She stepped forward directly between them, and she put herself in the space between Victor's reaching hand and whatever came next. Victor stopped. He looked at her. This woman, he did not know, who had no standing in his world, who had walked in from a diner with calloused hands and dark circles and a borrowed jacket, and had dismantled 15 years of his careful construction in less than 48 hours. "Move," he said. "No," she said. "This has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," she said. "My father died on those docks. You arranged it because he went to Daniel. He was a dock worker who never made more than $40,000 a year, and he had the honesty you were afraid of, and you treated that like a problem to be solved." She held his gaze without flinching. "You've spent 50 years deciding which lives matter based on how much they threatened you. It's finished." Victor looked past her at Adrian. "After everything," he said. And the performance was completely gone now. The smoothness, the measured concern, the constructed authority, all of it stripped away, leaving something older and smaller and more honest than anything he had shown in years. "After everything I gave you." "You gave me a lie," Adrian said, "and a target that was innocent." He stepped forward until he was beside Lily, and 15 years of carrying something that was never mine to carry. "I made you what you are." "Yes," Adrian said simply. "You did, and that's the part I have to spend the rest of my life answering for." Victor looked between them, at the ledger on the table, at the door where Caleb stood, at the empty chairs around the table where his captains and investors had been sitting 20 minutes ago. Then something went out of him. Lily watched it happen, not a dramatic collapse, not a scene, just a slow deflation, like air leaving something that had been held rigid by pressure for too long. He sat down in the nearest chair, not the one at the head of the table, just a chair. "What happens now?" he said. Adrian looked at Lily. She took out her phone. She pulled up the failsafe screen. "Now I cancel the automatic release," she said, "because the recipients already have everything they need, and midnight was always the backup plan, not the goal." She typed in the cancellation code. "Confirmed. The federal contact will be here within the hour. The journalist has already filed the story. It goes to print regardless, because we sent it to him first and told him not to wait." She put her phone away. "And every legitimate investor in this company now has access to the full financial record, which means any further attempt to suppress the evidence runs directly into their legal exposure." "You planned this," Victor said, not to anyone in particular, just the observation of a man processing his own undoing. "Daniel Cross planned this," Lily said. 15 years ago, we just read what he left us." The federal agents arrived at 7:43. Lily knew the exact time because she had checked her phone the moment she heard the elevator open. 2 agents, the kind who moved with the economy of people who had done this enough times that the process had become almost administrative. They identified themselves. They looked at the ledger. They listened to Caleb's briefing with the focused attention of people who had been expecting this call and were not surprised by its contents. They were not surprised, Lily would later understand, because the contact Caleb had used was someone who had been building a case around Moretti shipping for 4 years without the internal financial records needed to bring charges. The ledger was not new information to them. It was confirmation. It was the key that turned the lock they had been sitting in front of for half a decade. Victor Moretti was arrested at 7:58 in the evening. He did not resist. He stood and buttoned his jacket and walked out with the 2 federal agents with the specific dignity of a man who had decided that the one thing he had left to control was how he exited the room. Lily watched him go and felt something she had not expected to feel, not satisfaction, not relief, but something quieter. The feeling of a weight that had been carried by people she loved for 25 years, finally being set down. She sat in one of the boardroom chairs after the agents left and the room was quiet. Adrian sat across from her. They were both tired in the specific deep way that goes past physical into something structural. The tiredness of people who have spent 48 hours holding something extremely heavy and have just been allowed to put it down. "The story goes to print tomorrow morning," Lily said. "I know. My attorney says I should be prepared for a lot of attention in the next few weeks." "You have an attorney?" "I called one from the car on the way here. Frank recommended her. She does workers' rights cases mostly, but she said this falls within her wheelhouse." She looked at the ledger still sitting on the table. "Adrian, what happens to the company?" He leaned back in this chair and looked at the ceiling. "Whatever I can make honest, I keep. Whatever I can't, and there's a significant amount I can't, goes to the investigators." He paused. "The legitimate shipping operation is actually viable. Without the criminal infrastructure, it runs cleaner. The dock workers keep their jobs. The pension funds that Victor was skimming get restored." He paused again. "I'm going to cooperate fully. My attorneys say I'm looking at a cooperation agreement. I surrender assets, accept responsibility for what I personally authorized, and avoid prosecution for things I can demonstrate were done without my knowledge." He looked at her. "It's not nothing. The things I authorized were real. People were harmed by decisions I made." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking for absolution." "Good, because I don't have any to give." She held his gaze steadily. "But cooperation and accountability aren't the same as destruction. You can answer for what you did and still build something honest out of what's left." He was quiet for a moment. "Your mother," he said. "The medical expenses, the care she needs. I know what you want," she said. "And the answer is no." He stopped. "Not because I don't appreciate it, but because my mother spent 25 years protecting herself and me and Daniel's evidence from the Moretti family. The first thing I'm going to do when this is over is find a way to pay for her care that has nothing to do with Moretti money." She paused. "What you can do, what would actually help, is establish a transparent medical support fund for harbor employees and their families, the dock workers who had their pension funds stolen, the families of men who died in safety violations that were covered up. Make it independent, make it audited, name it after Daniel Cross." She watched his face. "That's the kind of help that means something." Adrian looked at her for a long time. "You know," he said slowly, "when I walked into the diner 2 nights ago, I thought the worst possible outcome was that the waitress was connected to Daniel Cross's family. And now I think the worst possible outcome would have been if I'd managed to frighten you into pretending you never saw the ring." He paused. "Or if you'd been anyone other than exactly who you are." Lily felt the warmth of that and also the complexity of it, and chose not to try to unpack either one in a boardroom at 8 o'clock at night when she had been awake for most of 2 days. "I need to get back to my mother," she said. "I know. And you need to meet with your attorney tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight." Caleb already called him. "Good." She stood up. She picked up the oilcloth ledger and held it for a moment. Then she set it back down on the table. "This stays here. It belongs to the investigation now." She started toward the door. Halfway there she stopped. She turned back. "Adrian." He looked up. "Your brother, Julian. The man he was trying to become, the one who wanted to make this thing honest, that man was right. You know that, don't you?" Something moved through Adrian Moretti's face that was not the controlled surface and was not the raw shock of the past 48 hours. It was something underneath both of those things, something that had been there a very long time waiting for permission to exist. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know." "Then be that man," she said. "Not for Julian, for yourself." She walked out of this boardroom and down the corridor and into the elevator, and she stood in the elevator alone for the 30 seconds it took to reach the lobby, and she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes and let herself feel for exactly those 30 seconds the full weight of everything that had happened since 2:17 in the morning 2 days ago. The exhaustion, the fear she had managed so carefully, the grief about her father, sharp and new and still finding its shape, the sound of Victor's voice on the tape, the look on Adrian's face when he read Daniel's 4 words in the ledger. For Julian, find this. The elevator opened. She walked through the lobby and out into the night air, and Caleb was leaning against the car waiting, and he handed her a cup of coffee from somewhere without explanation, and she took it and drank it and said, "Is she okay?" "Mrs. Holt called an hour ago. Rebecca is fine. She ate dinner and asked twice when you were coming back." He paused. "She also told Mrs. Holt that the sandwiches needed to be cut diagonally." Lily laughed. It came out unsteady and real and full of everything relief and grief and exhaustion, and the particular complicated warmth of loving someone whose mind was leaving her by degrees, but whose self remained stubborn and present and entirely Rebecca. "Take me to her," she said. Caleb took her to her mother. The drive back to the bay was quiet. Outside, Baltimore moved past in the way it always did at this hour, the dock lights on the water, the old neighborhoods with their lit windows, the particular geography of a city that had been built by working people and was still underneath everything a working city. Lily watched it pass and thought about Daniel Cross, who had loved this city enough to build a truth inside it that he trusted to outlast every attempt to erase it. Who had given his ring to a woman with nothing and told her to disappear and trusted that the truth was stronger than everything arrayed against it. She thought he would have liked knowing he was right. At the estate, she found her mother in the living room with Mrs. Holt watching the end of a program on television. Rebecca looked up when Lily came in, and her face did the thing it did on good days, the recognition that came before the words, the specific quality of warmth that said you're here. "You're late," Rebecca said. "I know." Lily sat beside her. "It's over, Mom. Victor is in federal custody. The evidence is with investigators. It's done." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. She looked at Lily's face with the careful attention of someone reading something important. "Daniel," she said. "The truth he left is safe," Lily said. "Everyone who matters has it now. His name is going to be cleared." Rebecca closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was something in them, not clarity, exactly, not the sharp, focused presence of her best hours, but something settled, something that had been held taut for a very long time, releasing by one careful degree. "Good," she said softly. "He was a good man. He deserved better than running." "He did," Lily said. "He deserved a lot better." She took her mother's hand and they sat together watching the end of the program without either of them paying attention to it. And after a while, Rebecca's head tipped sideways onto Lily's shoulder, the way it used to when Lily was small and the world was simpler, and the debts they were carrying were not yet visible. Lily sat very still and did not move and let her mother sleep. At 10:30, she heard Adrian's car on the drive. He came in quietly and stopped in the doorway of the living room when he saw the two of them, Rebecca asleep. Lily still, both of them occupying a silence that had earned itself. He stood there for a moment without speaking, and Lily looked at him across the room, and she thought that this was what it looked like when a person started to come back from a very long way away. Not sudden, not dramatic, just the beginning of something that had been interrupted for 15 years, finally finding its way back toward the light. I went to the kitchen. She heard him moving around in there looking for the right cabinet again, the small corrections, and after a few minutes he appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and set one on the end table beside her, without a word, and took a chair across the room and sat in the quiet with her and her sleeping mother and drank his coffee. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Outside, the bay moved in the dark, and the city held its 10,000 ordinary stories, and somewhere in a federal holding facility, a man who had spent 50 years deciding which truths were permitted to exist was learning what it felt like to have that decision taken away from him. And in a living room by the water, a tired waitress and a man who was trying to become something better than what he had been sat in the same silence and let the night be what it was. Not an ending, not yet, but the first real breath after a very long time of not being allowed one. The coffee was warm. The room was quiet. Rebecca's breathing was steady and even and present. That was enough. For tonight, that was exactly enough. The story broke at 6:15 the following morning. Lily was awake when it happened. She had not slept again after the coffee and the quiet of the night before, just moved through the early hours in the particular suspended state of someone waiting for a thing they know is coming. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her 3rd cup of coffee when her phone lit up with a text from the journalist Caleb had connected them with. It's live. All of it. She put the phone face down on the table and sat with that for a moment. Then she picked it up and read the story. It was thorough. It was accurate. It named Victor Moretti with the specificity that came from having 15 years of financial records to draw from. It named Julian. It named Daniel Cross. And it told Daniel's story the way it had actually happened, not the story Victor had maintained for 15 years, but the true one. The accountant who found the theft. The man who tried to protect the evidence. The man who had built a truth careful enough to survive everything thrown against it and left it in a lighthouse foundation for whoever came looking. It named Rebecca Bennett. It named Lily's father, Thomas Riley dockworker, 22 years on the Baltimore waterfront, died in an equipment accident in October 1994, survived by a partner and an unborn daughter. The journalist had found his employment records, his union membership, a photograph from a company picnic in 1992. A man Lily had never seen standing in sunlight, squinting at a camera with the easy posture of someone who had no idea what was coming. She stared at that photograph for a long time. Then she went to her mother's room and sat on the edge of the bed and waited until Rebecca stirred and opened her eyes. "There's a photograph of Dad in the news story," Lily said. Rebecca came awake slowly, the way she always did, and then faster when she read Lily's face. "Let me see," she said. Lily held out the phone. Rebecca looked at the photograph of Thomas Riley for a long time without speaking. Her hands holding the phone were very steady. Her face did the complicated thing it did on mornings when the clarity came through in layers. Recognition first, then memory, then the specific bittersweet quality of someone holding something precious that is also painful. "He hated having his picture taken," she said finally. "He always thought he blinked at the wrong moment." She looked at the photograph. "He looks good." "He looks like someone who deserved more time," Lily said. "He does." Rebecca handed the phone back. "He would have been so proud of you, not just for last night, for all of it. Every shift, every bill, every night you came home and got up and did it again." She paused. "He was that kind of person. He noticed the effort, not just the result." Lily pressed her lips together. She was not going to cry in front of her mother before 7 in the morning. She had made a decision about that, and she was holding to it. "The foundation," she said, moving forward, because forward was always where she operated best. Adrian's attorney filed the paperwork last night. Independent board public audits named for Daniel. Harbor medical and pension support. The first funds release in 30 days. She paused. They found the skimmed pension accounts. Victor had been pulling from them for 9 years. It's all going back. Rebecca nodded slowly, like each piece of information was settling into its proper place. "And Daniel?" she asked. Do they know where he is?" Lily had spent 2 hours the night before on that question specifically. The journalist had contacts in federal witness networks. Caleb had contacts she preferred not to ask too much about. The federal investigators, once they had the ledger and the tape and the offshore account records, had accessed files that had been sealed for a decade under a protection agreement. "He's alive," Lily said. Rebecca went completely still. "He's been in federal witness protection since 1995. He came forward 6 months after he disappeared, went to a regional FBI office in another state, handed them everything he could carry, and asked for protection in exchange for testimony. They gave him a new life somewhere else." She paused. "The testimony he gave in 1995 wasn't actionable at the time because they couldn't locate the primary financial records. The full ledger was at the lighthouse, and they didn't know where it was. So the case stalled, but Daniel stayed in. He never stopped cooperating." Rebecca put both hands over her mouth. "He's been working with investigators for 30 years, Lily said quietly. "From a distance, without being able to contact anyone, without knowing if the ring made it anywhere, if the cashbox survived, if any of it held together long enough." She reached for her mother's hand. "He didn't know about you. He thought you left Baltimore before he contacted the FBI. He didn't know you had the box." 30 years, Rebecca said. Her voice was barely a sound. "His attorney has filed to have his testimony formally acknowledged as part of this case. His name gets cleared publicly. The federal witness agreement gets reclassified." Lily squeezed her mother's hand. "He can use his own name again, Mom. When this is done, if he wants, he can come home." Rebecca made a sound that was not a word. It was the sound of something that had been held too long finally being set down. Lily held her mother's hand and let her cry, and did not try to fill the space with anything, because some things need their full room to exist in, and this was one of them. Outside Baltimore was waking up to a front-page story, and the phones at the federal prosecutor's office were already ringing, and 3 shipping executives who had done business with Victor Moretti for decades were calling attorneys of their own, and the dock union was holding an emergency meeting, and somewhere in a federal holding facility, a 71-year-old man was understanding for the first time in 50 years that the story had finally been taken out of his hands entirely. The months that followed moved the way significant change always moves in 2 speeds simultaneously, agonizingly slow and impossibly fast, depending on which part you were watching. The legal proceedings against Victor were methodical and thorough, and largely undramatic, which was not what anyone who followed the case in the news expected, but was exactly what the evidence produced. When you have a complete financial ledger, 3 decades of corroborating federal testimony, a cassette tape with your voice on it, discussing a murder, and the cooperation of the man who ran the organization you used to hide your operations inside, there is not a great deal of room for alternative narratives. Victor's attorneys tried 3 different angles over 4 months. The evidence was fabricated. Daniel Cross was an unreliable witness. Adrian Moretti had orchestrated the entire sequence of events to remove a rival from power. Each approach collapsed within days of being filed. The ledger was authenticated. Daniel's 30-year cooperation record was unimpeachable, and Adrian, who could have complicated the case significantly by being difficult or uncooperative, was neither. I was in fact the most cooperative defendant his attorney had represented in 30 years of practice. He showed up for every meeting. He answered every question. He surrendered every asset that the cooperation agreement required, and several that it didn't, including a portion of the legitimate shipping business that he transferred to independent employee ownership, rather than allowing it to be caught up in the asset freeze. He attended accountability sessions with federal mediators, with the dock union, with the families of men who had been harmed by operations he had personally authorized. None of it erased what those things had been. He never asked anyone to pretend that it did. Lily saw him at irregular intervals during those months, not as a pattern not planned, just the overlapping geography of 2 people whose lives had been knotted together in one extraordinary week and had not fully separated. She saw him at the Foundation's first board meeting, where he sat in the 3rd chair from the end and said almost nothing, and voted in favor of every measure that expanded coverage to dock worker families. She saw him at the prosecutor's office twice, once in a hallway where they nodded at each other with the particular acknowledgement of people who share a language no one else in the building speaks. She saw him once at the care facility where Rebecca had been moved a comfortable place well-staffed with a garden and large windows paid for through the harbor workers' support structure that was now fully funded and independently managed. He had stopped by to bring Rebecca a plant, which was such an unexpectedly specific and domestic gesture that Lily stood in the doorway of her mother's room for a full 5 seconds before she could arrange her face. Rebecca had looked at the plant and then at Adrian and said, "It's too big for this windowsill." "I can get a smaller one," he said. "No, move the lamp." She pointed. "There, now it fits." He moved the lamp. It fit. Lily watched him rearrange the furniture in her mother's room at the direction of a 73-year-old woman with a fading memory and a completely unfaded sense of spatial logic, and she thought that this was one of those moments that was not in any way dramatic or significant on its surface, but would probably live in her memory longer than things that were. She was finishing her accounting certification. Night school again, same program she had dropped out of 3 years earlier, but different now in the particular way that returning to something after a significant interruption always makes it different. You understand more, but you also understand how much you paid for the understanding. Her professor, a precise woman in her 50s, who had spent 20 years in forensic accounting before moving to teaching, had pulled Lily aside after the 3rd class and said that the coded ledger analysis she had submitted as part of her case study coursework was one of the most sophisticated pieces of applied accounting she had read from a student in a decade. Lily had said thank you and gone back to her seat. The Harbor Light Diner reopened in the spring. Frank had started the worker ownership conversion 6 months earlier, mostly because Lily had sat across from him one afternoon with a legal pad and walked him through the structural options with the focused efficiency of someone who had spent the past year thinking about what legitimate financial architecture actually looked like. He had listened, asked good questions, and said yes before she finished the third page. The renovation kept most of what made the diner itself, the jukebox that still ran through its scratchy repertoire at irregular intervals, the corner booth where certain people sat with their backs to the wall, the specific quality of the overnight coffee that was either the best or worst in Baltimore depending on the hour and who was asking. What changed was the name above the door. They kept Harbor Light, but added the founding date, and in smaller letters below, worker-owned and operated. The first night they reopened, they ran out of pie by 7 o'clock. Lily was managing the floor when it happened. She was not waiting tables anymore. The accounting work and the foundation management had restructured her days significantly, but she was present because certain things you show up for regardless, and the reopening of a place that had given her a livelihood through the hardest years of her life was one of them. She was behind the counter refilling the coffee urn when the bell above the door rang at 9:30. She did not look up immediately. She had broken herself of that habit mostly, but she felt the particular quality of quiet that moved through a room when Adrian Moretti walked into it, and she looked up, and there he was, darker jacket than the last time. No rain tonight. Knuckles unbruised and unswollen because his hands were not doing the things his hands used to do. He looked at her across the length of the diner with an expression that was complicated and honest, and not performing any particular version of itself. He chose a table in the middle of the room, not the corner booth. She noticed that. She would not have expected to feel something at it, but she did. The small, quiet significance of a man choosing to put his back to the door for the first time in however many years he had been unable to. She brought the coffee without being asked, because some things remain true, regardless of everything else that changes. She set the mug down. He looked at it. Then he looked at his hands, and she followed his gaze, and she saw what she had not noticed when he came in. He was not wearing the ring. The specific absence of it, the bare fourth finger where the heavy gold band had sat, for as long as she had known him, registered as something significant before she could fully articulate why. "Lose something?" she asked. The words came out familiar, the particular ease of two people who have shared enough serious moments to find the lighter register without effort. He looked at his hand, at the place where the ring had been. "No," he said. "I finally stopped carrying it." She stood there for a moment. "Julian's grave," he said before she could ask. "I left it there this morning, not as a debt or a symbol or a reminder." He paused. "Just it belongs with him, not on me." Lily thought about that, about what it meant to put something down that you had been carrying so long it had reshaped your hand around it, about the specific courage required to stop organizing your life around a wound and start organizing it around something else. "That's a good reason," she said. He reached into his jacket pocket. What he placed on this table beside the coffee mug was small and quiet and completely without the weight of everything the other ring had carried. A simple band, gold but thin. No crest, no emblem, no lighthouse, no lightning crack, no hidden history encoded in the metal. Nothing it was asking her to carry except itself. He did not pick it up and present it with ceremony. He just placed it on the table and left it there and looked at her without the controlled surface, without the managed performance, with the honest face of a man who had spent 18 months learning how to be afraid of the right things. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer," he said. "I'm not asking you to forget what I was or excuse any of it. I'm not asking you to step into anything that isn't entirely yours to step into." He paused. "I'm asking if you'll consider building something with me. Something that has nothing in its foundation except honesty." He paused again. "That's all." Lily looked at the ring on the table. She thought about the night she had walked into that ruined apartment and found her mother in the closet, clutching a metal cashbox, and said, "All right," because all right was the only thing that made sense in that moment. She thought about 6 hours of invoices by lamplight and a man who did not once touch the box without her permission. About diagonally cut sandwiches in a kitchen on the bay, and a plant that was too big for the windowsill, and a lamp that got moved. About her mother saying he would have been proud of you, not for the result, for the effort. About Adrian at his brother's grave this morning, putting down 15 years of misdirected grief with enough gentleness to leave the ring and not throw it. She thought about what her mother had said about her father. He noticed the effort, not just the result. She picked up the ring and placed it beside his coffee cup, not on her finger. Not yet, but not back in his pocket either. "Finish your coffee first," she said. "Then we'll talk." Something moved through his face. Not quite a smile, but the infrastructure of one, the thing that comes before the place where a smile starts when it has been a long time in arriving and is not entirely sure of its welcome. "Fair enough," he said. She went back behind the counter. The diner moved around her in its ordinary evening rhythms, the jukebox finding its way through something slow and scratchy, the kitchen sounds, the low conversation of people who had come in from the cold for something warm, the particular music of a place that was doing what it was built to do. Lily refilled 3 cups, settled a check, told Frank the pie situation needed addressing before next Friday, and looked across the diner at a man who was sitting with his back to the door drinking his coffee. She thought about Daniel Cross, who had trusted the truth to outlast everything thrown against it and had been right. She thought about Rebecca, who had remade herself from nothing out of love and was sitting in a garden at a care facility right now, probably reorganizing the furniture in the common room to her personal specifications. She thought about her father, Thomas Riley, who had noticed the effort and not just the result, and had died for the honesty of it and deserved every word of the story that had finally been told about him. She thought about the fact that the truth, when it is built carefully enough and kept faithfully enough and trusted completely enough, does not die. It waits. It waits in sealed compartments in lighthouse foundations and metal cash boxes in maintenance closets and in the muscle memory of a woman who cut every sandwich diagonally because someone she loved had told her once that it tasted better. It waits until someone is finally ready to carry it forward. And across the harbor, light diner. Adrian Moretti finished his coffee and set down the mug and looked up and found her already looking, and neither of them looked away. Some things are not built in extraordinary moments. They are built in the ordinary ones, cup by cup, question by question. The slow, patient work of 2 people deciding that honesty is worth more than the comfort of a story that was never true to begin with. That was where they started. And that the dailiness of it, the difficulty of it, the stubborn, unglamorous, completely real possibility of it was everything.